Hey, it's Craig for Yeast Coast Brewers Club. Today we're going to be doing the Bracken Kettle wheat beer kit. It's an extract kit. So inside the kit, what you get is a set of instructions. Pretty simple to follow. Lists all the equipment that you're going to need for a brew day, all the equipment you're going to need for bottling day, and it's pretty simple, straightforward set of instructions. So you get that. In this particular kit, there is a 1 kilogram bag of dry malt extract. This one's Bavarian wheat because we're doing a wheat beer kit. You get 1 can of liquid malt extract. This one is Black Rock Whispering wheat. It could have been any wheat extract because we're doing a wheat kit. So what I'm going to do with this one is I have a sink full of warm water. I'm just going to soak it in there so that it's not hard to get out of the can when we're ready to put it in the pot. The other thing we have in the kit is we have 1 package of wheat beer yeast. This was specifically designed to work best with the wheat beers. And there is a package of priming sugar. This is dextrose, and this is used on bottling day if you bottle beer. I keg beer, so I don't use this. I've got a full collection of these if everybody wants them. And that's it. That's what's in the kit. So the priming sugar I'm not going to use right now. I'll put that back in the kit, in the box, and we'll move the box to the side. As far as equipment goes, what you will need is you'll need a brew kettle or a brew pot. I've got this one pretty inexpensive. It's a stainless steel pot. You'll need a pot that holds at least 16 liters. This one is 20 some odd, so it's fine. You'll need a airlock and a rubber stopper or a rubber bung, that's what they call it. You will need a hydrometer. You'll need the hydrometer to take your specific gravity readings of your must. Before and after, right before bottling, you do a little math, nothing hard, subtract the numbers, and you figure out your percent of alcohol content, tell you how strong your beer is going to be. So you need one of those. You need a thermometer for taking your temperature readings. You can't pitch your yeast unless your must is around 30 degrees, so you'll need one of those. These 2 items are an absolute must, no pun intended. This is a handy little tool that I've picked up. It's around $5. If you are brewing wine, or if you're doing a beer kit where the must is already prepared for you, like the brew house kits, you'll need one of those. The must comes in a bag, or the wine comes in a bag that's got a pretty tightly sealed stopper on there. It's hard to get off unless you got this little tool. So you put that on, you pry off, comes off pretty easy. I've got a big measuring cup that I'm using to measure my water out for the boil, and I've got a funnel. All this has been sanitized already. Talking about sanitizing and cleaning, you need to clean all your equipment before and after you use it. So what I use to clean the equipment is I use the OxyClean Free powder, and I use about 1/4 to 1/2 of the measuring cup that's inside. Put it into my brew buckets, into my carboys, slosh it around, make sure everything is good and clean, scrub it with a brush. Then you'll want to rinse it 2 to 3 times with cool, clean water to make sure there's nothing left behind. That's cleaning. You also need to sanitize. Sanitize is not cleaning. Sanitize makes everything sterile. What I like to use if I'm doing beer is I like to use Star San. Star San is an acid-based sanitizer. When you put it into the bucket or whatever you're cleaning, it gets pretty foamy. If you're doing beer, you don't have to worry about the foam. The foam actually acts as a yeast nutrient, so it's good for it. You don't have to wash it out. Some people do because they don't like the foam. That's fine too. It doesn't really matter. But I leave it in there. If you're doing wine, you can use this sodium metabisulfate. I don't like to use this in beer because it seems to ruin the head retention in the beer if it's left in there, if it's not rinsed really, really well. So I only prefer to use this in wine because it's natural in wine anyway, so it only adds to it, and it's a It's fine for wine, but I don't use it for beer. The other thing you need is a brew bucket. This one is a 25 liter, already graduated on the side, food grade plastic bucket. I've stuck a thermometer to the side of this, little $2 stick-on thermometer. It's pretty accurate. Right now it has sanitizer in it. I'll bring it over. Because I need to add some of these items to the bucket to sanitize. So I'm going to add the thermometer. I'm going to add the hydrometer. All of this will want to be sanitized. I'm going to add the airlock and the rubber bung. Now in here already, I've had my spoon that I'm going to be using to stir up inside the pot. I've had the can opener that I'm going to use to open the can of liquid extract. Even that gets sanitized. And somewhere in here there's a pair of scissors, which is going to be used to cut open the yeast packages and the package of dry malt extract. So those are in there as well. You can see the foaming action of the sanitizer. If I shook this up, this bucket's already clean, but if I shook this up, it would get super foamy inside of there in like a few seconds. So we don't need to shake that right now. So those are the scissors that we're going to use. I'll leave them back in there. There's a funnel if you need it for putting it into a carboy. I'm not sure I need it, but I'll sanitize it anyway. I'll put my spoon back in there. That's it for cleaning and sanitizing. So it's a little more involved than that. I don't really need to get into a whole spiel of how to clean and sanitize. There's a lot of videos already available on YouTube for that, and you can watch them, and it's all pretty self-explanatory. So that's it for that. Now what we're okay, so I went ahead and I added the 4 liters of water to the brew pot and set the lid to high so it could go ahead and start boiling. So we've got our 4 liters of water now pretty much boiling. Before we get to adding stuff to this, why don't you take a look at our brewmaster. Brewmaster, say hello to everybody. Over here. Say hi everybody. And of course, the dog's name is Brewski. So, right Brewski? Yeah. Alright, so now that the water's come to a boil, what you gotta do is you gotta remove it from the heat, and we're gonna start our additions. So the first addition we're gonna do is our liquid malt extract. Continue to stir while you're adding. Ooh, it smells good. Sure we gets it all. Now the only thing that I did, that right there, I went ahead and boiled the kettle so I could get all the malty goodness out of this container. So fill it up with some boiling water. Now, take our spoon, stir it around in there. Make sure we get it all. Don't want to waste any. Now, here's a very important tip. You just put boiling hot water into a metal tin. Do not attempt to pick it up without your off-glove hot surface handler and an oven mitt. You will stick your fingerprints onto this can. Trust me, I've almost done it. So pour that into the pot. So that takes care of that. Take our sanitized scissors that we sanitized earlier. Cut open our bag of dry malt extract. You might get some clumping when you add this in, but just keep stirring. You also want to make sure you don't get any boil over in here when you add this. So slowly add dry malt extract while stirring. Starts to foam up a little bit. Let's keep stirring. So make sure that all the necessary fermentation sugars are in your brew. The yeast doesn't have anything to convert. You won't get a very strong beer. It's just about the bio tools. Bumps up on the bag. Make sure we get it all. I want it all. So that's it for that. Make sure you give it a good stir so it's incorporated in there. The liquid is starting to look pretty much light beige in color, light brown in color. Now we got to return this to the hot lid for 5 minutes of boil time. Stirring while boiling. You don't want boil over. That would be a bad mess to clean up. And nobody wants to clean up a mess. I've got lots of room in my pot, so if I see it starts to boil over, I'll take it off the hot lid. Some people use a spray bottle of water to keep the foam down. I don't have one. Maybe I'll get one next time, but I don't have one now. So I'm just gonna keep watching it. Starting to smell like beer already. You don't want anything to burn on. Burnt on beer, no good. So we're just going to continue to stir this and keep it boiling for 5 minutes, watching that it doesn't boil over, and we'll cut right back as soon as we're ready to cool this must. Okay, so our beer has been boiling now for 5 minutes on the stove, so we turned it off. So what we got to do now is bring this must down to about 30 degrees in order to pitch the yeast. My water is not super cold that I got filtered. So what I'm going to do is I fill the sink up with cold water, and I'm going to lay the brew pot into the cold water. You want to try to bring this down as rapidly as possible. You don't want any water inside the brew pot. Just make sure. So I'm going to leave the lid on because I don't want to have any contaminants. I might change this water out a couple of times through this process, but you can buy what's called a wort chiller, and it's basically a coil of copper that fits inside the pot, and you hook it up to your cold water tap, and it runs water through the coil and back out the top. So no water ever gets into the must, but it's like acts like a big heat sink and cools the must. I don't have one of those. I will eventually get one. So I'm doing the sink method. So cool water in the sink. This water is already starting to turn a little warmish because this pot is very, very hot. So once it cools down, I got a bag of ice also, but I wouldn't pitch the ice in here right away because the ice is just going to flat out melt. And I'm going to cool it down a little bit first with the cold water. Then I'm going to add the bag of ice to it. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pause right here. I'm going to change this water out a couple of times. When we get to adding the ice, we're going to cut back and we'll show you the ice in the sink around the bucket. Okay, so I changed the water out about 3-4 times with new cool water. Now I'm going to add a bag of ice just to help get it down to the proper temperature. So we get it nice and cool. Grab some. Brewmaster's coming to check things out. He's really curious on the progress. God, that's a solid chunk. Okay, that'll work. I don't want to waste any. Dog will eat that, he loves ice. Clean up our mess. I don't know why ice piece froze so bad as it is. Hooked it down in the trash compactor. Okay. So I'm going to take my brew spoon and give it a little stir. Slow the pot down. Okay, so I'm just going to let that cool in there until it reaches the temperature. I'm going to take a temperature reading, thermometer reading, whatever, in here now just so I can see what it is. Because I can see how much longer I got to wait. Probably till all this ice is melted. You're going to want to get this as cool as quick as possible. That's why a lot of people use the immersion wort chillers. Does a pretty good job. So right now this thing only goes to 40, so we're well above 40. So we're going to wait for another little while, and we'll be right back after these commercial interruptions. Okay, so we've added the ice into the water. And now I'm going to take another temperature reading to see where we're at. We're looking for around between 25 and 30 degrees. It's the ideal temperature. If you sprinkle your yeast on while it's too hot, you're just going to kill the yeast. It's not going to do anything. Nobody wants to kill the yeast. So we are exactly about 26 degrees. So that's good enough. Right where we want it. It's going to cool down a little bit when I add the water. So we're going to take this out of the ice bath. Let the ice go. Just going to wipe off the outside so I don't get this in the beer when I pour it. Okay, so now what we're going to want to do is get our primary fermenter that we're going to use. Already sanitized. Star sand still in it. Just dump a little liquid out there. And we're going to pour the must into the primary fermenter. You're going to want to let it splash so it has good aeration. And there we go. Now that's in there, we're going to want to top to about 20 liters with water. For this, you'll want to use filtered water. You don't want to use tap water for this. You probably can, but I don't like doing it. Try to minimize splash. Here we go. Wow, almost used it all. And we're going to want to give this a stir. I have another, you don't want to film this over here. Table's messy. Yeah. long-handled spoon that I use when the must's already cooled down. So we're going to want to give this a pretty good stir up. Keep the brewmaster away from it. Actually, I'm going to move this up onto the island. We don't want brewski here brew. So, we're going to give that a really good stir like we just did. And we're going to want to take a final temperature reading just before pitching the yeast. So the temperature gauge on the side says it's around 22 degrees. We'll see how accurate that is. What do you know? 22 degrees. So these stick-on thermometers are pretty accurate. And you'll be able to see the temperature going up as the yeast starts to do its work. So we'll just make sure 22 degrees, right on the money. Okay, so what we're going to do is, I don't want to leave this in my kitchen to ferment. I've got a special brew room that I use for brewing. So we're going to cut away. I'm going to bring this down there. That's where I'm going to pitch the yeast, so I don't have to move it again. Once the yeast gets pitched, I don't really want to be shaking it around and stirring it up. I want to let it settle. So we're going to cut away. I'm going to bring this downstairs and we'll cut back in when I'm ready to pitch the yeast. Okay, so welcome to Craig's Brew Room. This is a room in the house, the only unfinished room. And I keep the temperature of this room at a steady 20-21 degrees all the time. So that's why there's the brew room, and we can keep it at a constant temperature. So what I got to do now is two things. One, I need to take a specific gravity reading of the must before you pitch the yeast. If you don't do it now, there's no way of telling really what your alcohol content is in your finished product. So I'm going to try to see, there's a lot of foam in here. So I'm going to try to see if I can, everything that touches this now has to be sanitized, including your hands. So I'm just going to see if I can move enough of the foam out of the way to try to get a specific gravity reading. You just drop it in like a bobber on a fishing line. I'll do a separate video on how you read this thing with close-ups and whatnot. Gonna give it a few spins to get the bubbles off the side of it. So we are sitting at about 1.042. That's our specific gravity reading. We'll record that in a few minutes. Now the only thing left to do is to pitch the yeast. So we're going to take our yeast packet with our sanitized scissors. Cut the top of the package off. We're going to evenly sprinkle the yeast over the top of the must. How even that was, but I did my best. I love the smell of yeast. It's awesome. It's just like fresh baked bread. So what we're going to do now is, I don't use the lid with the airlock. Some people got it. It's great if you do. I don't. I use my brew buckets for wine and everything. So I prefer to leave the lid loose on the bucket. So what I do is I put the lid on, and over the handle area I just snap it down on two sides, which leaves these sides partially open for the CO2 to escape. If you don't do that, if you snap the whole lid down, this sucker is going to blow right off. So when the pressure builds up, so this is fine. What's going to happen is, over the next 5 to 7 days, is the head is going to rise on this beer, and it's going to probably come very close to this lid, if not spill over a little bit. I usually got a bigger plastic bucket that I put this in to catch spillover, but I don't know where it's to right now. So if it spills over a bit, I'll just clean it up with a paper towel and we'll move on. Once that head that rises to the top drops, as soon as that head drops down to normal level, to the level of the must, I'm going to rack this from the primary to the secondary. And for secondary, I'm just going to use a carboy. So it'll probably be one of these carboys here. Once I rack it over into here, I'm going to leave it for another 14 days. Oh, my cameraman almost killed himself, tripping up and stuff. He needs a backup camera. So I'm going to put it in there for another 14 days, but we're going to show that after next week. So that's it. That's as simple as it is. That's an extract kit. There really isn't much to it. It's a low cost thing to do. This will produce a really good quality beer if it turns out. I'm going to show the kegging process, the whole 9 yards, and of course my favorite part, sampling. We won't forget that. We'll sample lots of this beer. So that's it for now. Go ahead and share the video, enjoy it, and we'll keep updates on this beer. There's going to be future videos for wine kits and other beer kits that we're going to do. I'll probably do a brew house one or something similar next. So until next time, cheers.